So I went ahead and ground out all the surface that was suspect marginal from ripping off these parts. And over here where the big crack showed up, I think it would have showed up no matter what. I think I had some bad epoxy, whether I didn't mix it thoroughly or didn't mix it well, or if it got wet. But the more I was grinding and the little layers were just peeling off, the sun's not messing this up. So I just kept going as long as it was coming loose. I got this big old area, and I see another little spot here where when it gets hot from the sander, it was just kind of lifting off. The good epoxy doesn't do that, so I don't know, must have had some bad stuff. So we're going to patch all that up, but this was probably going to happen no matter what, because it's just some bad material. I got some little squares of epoxy and cloth made up. I got to patch the bolt holes from the inside, the bolt holes I'm not going to use, and when this cures out, then I can ram filler from the outside. I'll have a backer. So before I put those patches on the inside, I got my pencil grinder or die grinder, and I cleaned out the inside of these holes because they were all full of caulk. And I cleaned them back to the Kusa board or good hard epoxy, and then I put the patches on, and then after they cured, I started shoving the holes full of thickened epoxy, just thickened with polyfiber, and little bits of glass, and more epoxy, more glass, more epoxy, and just shoved it in there as far as it go until it was overfilled, and then we let it cure and then sanded it flat. These bottom two holes are below the water line when the boat's in the water, so I was taking a little extra care to make sure that nothing exciting would happen in the future. Now this is where I removed the through hull that fed the freshwater pump. This is a much bigger hole, so I used the same process. I put a patch on the inside, I plugged the hole with thickened epoxy with lots of strands of fibers, and when it cured, then I took my grinder and beveled the outside surface, and I put in a few layers of glass over the finished product just to make absolutely sure. So we got a couple of skim coats of thickened epoxy back here, just trying to get it kind of close. It's to the point now where I'm going to have to be a little bit more careful about putting different layers on. Try to get it a little more fair, but I'll probably do it's epoxy, it cures slow, so I just do one little skim coat every day that I'm here, and hopefully by the time I get the engine bracket back and have it painted, this will be ready. So the new holes that I drilled through the transom and through the Kusa board, I sealed them up with epoxy. I just made this little quickie rag on a piece of wire, and just wanted to make sure everything's real sealed, although Kusa board's not supposed to absorb water, so I guess it's not as important as if this would have been a wood core transom. There's another skim coat on the transom. I've skipped to Total Fair because I don't really need a whole lot, and it's so easy. It's much more easy to see to sand for me than the white thickened epoxy. Plus it sands really easy, so I don't think I'll get it this time, but maybe the time after this it'll be good enough, and I can and then I'll start prepping for spraying some paint on the transom here. So typically I've been coming to the foundry in the morning and working on this transom because the sun comes up over that building and it's unbearable after about right now 8 o'clock, 8:30, and it was looking pretty good. I got it sanded and painted. But then yesterday I was here in the afternoon where the sun was in a different position, and my God, it looked horrible. It looks like a moonscape. It's just not flat. So brought my belt sander this morning. I'm going to take a pass with the belt sander. It's harder because this is in the way, and I'm not taking that off. But this doesn't even meet my standards, which are pretty low when it comes to body work. So I'm going to step backwards. Still don't have the engine bracket from the welder, but I'm supposed to get it this afternoon. So when I get it back, I have to prime it and paint it. So if I spend a few hours getting a new skim coat on this, it won't set me back any. And as far as foundry work goes, I got 2 dips going so far. So far so good. As
never used the belt sander on the boat before, but the advantage is that it has a flat, stiff bottom. So if I can hold it flat against the transom, it will only cut the high spots. It doesn't have a soft, squishy bottom like the random orbital sander, so it won't cut anything but what touches that flat bottom of the sander. So if I have enough skill, I should be able to greatly increase the flatness of this thing.
This just shows you how bad it was. This is what the belt sander is hitting. I just can't see that well. I don't see this stuff. But I sure saw it yesterday afternoon. And I'm sure seeing it now. I think I'm going to go over it with the random orbital and then I guess skim it with some filler. I don't really know how to get it flatter. We'll work on it. Alright, we're all wiped it down with acetone. I went over it all with the 6-inch random orbital and some 80 grit paper. And I kind of think I know what might have happened. The paint is really hard. And the body filler is really easy. So I think when I was sanding it, I was just cutting more into the body filler, into the epoxy filler, and not so much into the paint. Really not sure though. So I'm gonna give the whole thing a skim coat of filler, and then maybe sand it with a block, with a long flat board or something. Try to keep from divoting it up on the sanding phase. Feels pretty good right now. There's a few divots from the belt sander where I didn't hold it really flat. I don't want to sand those out because that's just going to leave a hole again. So I'm going to put some filler over the whole thing. So I made a sanding block. It fits some sanding belts that I have bought the wrong size that I've been hanging on to for a long time. And it works, I think, really well. This is 80 grit. I'm just going to knock the bumps off of it, and I'm going to go to 120 grit and get it kind of smooth. And then I'll probably have a few more divots to fill, but I might switch to Bondo because they're just superficial. They're just, yeah, this is much better. I'm glad I did this. So I did the first blocking, and I said I was going to come back with Bondo, but I had enough of this epoxy filler, barely. I did another skim coat, and then I blocked it with the 80 grit, and I blocked it with 120, and I just hit it with the random orbital with 180 and rinsed it off. And with the wet, you can kind of see, and I think it's pretty good. I mean, for me. So I'm gonna let it dry. I'm gonna spray a little paint on it. I think after lunch, when the sun gets in a better position, I can see better and see how it looks. And if I need to address issues, I'll address them. Just sprayed the first coat on the resanded transom, and big difference, big difference. Still not absolutely mirror flat, but it's so much better. I did get a bunch of splatters in my paint though. I don't know where that came from, the gun. Not sure where that came from. But anyway, first coat, I can knock it back with some maybe 320 paper and spray second coat tomorrow, and hopefully it'll come out good.
So if you look really closely while I'm spraying this, it looks like I'm developing a pattern, a vertical pattern, where the vertical strokes look like there's not enough wetness for them to blend in. And the reason it looks like that is because that's what's happening, but I can't see it. So I'm officially hanging up my spray gun, except for what I'm going to do in the next few days. After that, I am going to get my son, I'm going to volunteer my son to help me with any spraying of any amount. I just can't see. My 1953 model eyeballs are just not up to the task apparently. So I will throw in the towel and get help from now on when I'm spraying anything. But of course I'm going to go ahead and finish this project with a spray gun. We'll just deal with however it looks.
Well, I've got myself in a little bit of a pickle. Felt like it was starting to rain a little bit, which it probably is. So I wanted to get the boat backed up a little bit to get it out of the rain. So I grabbed a forklift. And I hadn't charged it in a while, and I kind of knew better, but it still said 8 on the 1 to 10 scale. So I got it out here and I got it hooked up, and now it is dead as a doornail. It's 36-volt battery. This is big black thing is the battery.
So the leads from the big battery charger that goes with this thing are really short. So I used a welding lead for one leg of the charging cables to make it longer. And then I found some 4 conductor, looks like maybe number 6, and I smashed all the conductors into one. And I used that for the other lead, trying to reach out to the forklift to get some juice into the battery.
So I got a welding lead as a ground, and I have a old 4 conductor. I guess it was probably a trailer feed for the hot. I've got them shoved in a piece of copper pipe and smashed up. And I think this will work for a little while. They definitely will overheat because I don't know how many amps this battery charger puts out, but it's a bunch. All I need is for no fire to occur until I get enough charge to the battery where I can back it over here and hook it up direct. Let's see what happens when we turn it on. Got a red light, not sure what that means. Well, that was weird. It wouldn't work. The battery charger wouldn't turn on. It was reading a fault. I don't know whether it realized there was too many amps because the cables were too long or something. It wouldn't turn on. But after sitting for a few minutes, the forklift came back to life. I backed it straight over here and plugged it in, and now we got a good charge. Should last me a little while. This old battery's kind of worn out. When it was new, it probably last me for months, but now I just get a couple of days out of it.
An executive decision has been made. We're going with aluminum for the swim step tops. So I have this old highway sign, and it's big enough to get both pieces out of. It's got some bullet holes in it I'll have to deal with. So I set it up here, and you can see the dotted line at the far end where it's going to come against the pod. So I have to cut that first, and then we'll set it back on top and mark the rest of it.
So with the first cut done, I can slide it into place, and I lay it on the ground and mark the bottom. I don't know if the final cut on the bottom, I may trim it a little bit, but at least it'll get it close to being the right shape. Got my 2 plates cut and fitting pretty darn well. And even though I'm not going to install them, this gives me a chance to clean them up and prime them when I prime the main structure. And then I got that sticky stuff on the back. I got this stuff on the bottom. I need to see if I can get that off, or if that's on there forever. But now I'm going to attempt to spray the epoxy with my little gun. I don't know if it'll spray it or not. And I'm going to spray my swim steps, and I'm going to spray this contraption because the paint that I'm using is not recommended to go over bare aluminum. I've had good luck with the epoxy in the past. And these things have this sticky on the back, and I can't, well, I give up on trying to get it off because I was having to put so much heat that the plate was working. So I'm just going to try to sand it down, etch the surface and stuff. So when I left 2 days ago, I put a little filler on this area here. I had ground it down. It was pretty lumpy. And I have filler on a couple of the wells to kind of make them look a little better. But I love these wells. I can't do this. I'm really happy with how these big old wells came out. Lots of metal. I don't know why I can't do it. Maybe my machine.
So the epoxy that I have now, or most epoxies, it's a real heavy bodied material that's usually sprayed industrially with a pressure pot where you actually pump the paint through the hose. But this is just a little siphon gun. But I mixed a little thinner with it, and it actually sprayed pretty good. and it didn't run. I think I can do a better job with the epoxy paint than the paint. But anyway, got a good coat on everything, and let it sit for a day, and I'm ready to spray paint over it.
So I sprayed these two this morning, and I believe the paint is hard enough to resist blue tape. So I'm going to tape the perimeter and put some non-skid texture in the middle part.
So this is the same non-skid method that I use on the rest of the boat. It's epoxy paint thickened. Now I'm using polyfiber as a thickener, but I think pretty much any thickener would work. I wouldn't do it with any other kind of paint except epoxy, because you put it on there really thick and you need it all to cure out. And I think most paints it wouldn't cure in the thick spots. So just make it thick where it won't settle, and roll it out with the little fuzzy roller until you like the looks of it, and that's it. You let it alone. It's going to be super sharp. If it was a work boat and everybody was going to have rubber boots on, you could just leave it alone. It would be extremely non-skid. But for bare feet and for bare knees, it needs sanding, because it's brutally sharp before it gets sanded down. So really the only two parameters, the paint still needs to be wet enough so it sticks to the roller and picks itself up, but it needs to be thick enough where it doesn't settle back down. So if you get it in that range and you use a fuzzy roller, it'll just pick up all these little peaks, because the paint wants to stick to the roller and it kind of stays there. So it's really easy, and I think it gives a nice non-skid. And because it's so incredibly hot these days, by the next morning the epoxy was cured enough to sand, and you just gotta kind of sand to taste. It just depends on what you want the texture to look like. Obviously, the less sanding, the more non-skid. It also holds more dirt in the cracks, so the more sanding, it's a little easier to keep clean. But there's no right or wrong. You just do what you like. So this is what I've done. So this was very predictable. This was kind of an intense deal, and I got terrible footage because you get your hands all sticky and you forget about the cameras, and the clock is ticking and the stuff's skinning over, and it's just rush. So very little video, but we totally smeared the surface of the pod, not just a perimeter of caulk, but we had like a good 3/16 of it, over 100% of the face. And then we're rushing, even though I did a dry fit of all the bolts the day before, so some of them were still hard to get in. The 3 new bolts on each end, I use these galvanized plate washers to kind of distribute the load. These are just a stock item at a bolt supply place, and they're really hefty and they're really cheap. Now, if I was in a saltwater environment, I might not want to use the galvanized, but we're not really in a saltwater environment for the most part. And we coated the bolts with sticky and put them in there, and we just tried to get them all as snug as quick as we could, and it was a battle. I almost came here with Debbie, my wife, to help me, and that would have been a terrible idea because it's pretty physical. I ended up, my friend Chip came and helped me, and we got it in, and we got everything snugged up, and we're good. The bracket is now on the boat, and Lord help me if I got to take it off again.
Before I fasten the sheets down on the swim platforms, I want to take it for a ride and visualize or visually check out how the water runs around my floatie to make sure it's not doing anything bad. And if it's all hunky-dory, copacetic, I will fasten the plates down on the swim step. We're ready to go right now. Just need to put a few screws in this floater. End of a long day. Everything's mounted. Well, most things are mounted. The handrails are mounted. The swim ladder is mounted. The platforms are just sitting there. I want to leave them off. The floatie's mounted. The engine's mounted. All the controls are mounted. I don't want to take it for a run tomorrow. I want to let the sealant cure another day because it's pretty thick. We weren't able to really pull the aluminum tight to the boat. It's probably got a 1/16 of an inch or maybe more of sealant. And we did that last time too, and it was okay, but I'm gonna let it cure for another day. So tomorrow I'm gonna come clean the inside of the boat, which is horrible, and I probably may have to repaint this back part because I got caulk and yunk and everything on it, but I'm super happy right now, and I think the motor just looks better. Just that 5.5 inches I moved it forward just makes it look better, I think. And then I guess having the swim step the same color as the pod, maybe that makes it look better. Not sure. Anyway, heading home. I'm a whoop puppy. Well, I've had the boat for a year, and today is the second time I've pulled it to the river to do a test run, and it's pulling really good. I don't have my surge brakes working yet, but the trailer handles really well. We're going to put it in the water and see if I've done any good by shortening the engine pod and putting a floatie in.
And for only the second time, I'm launching the boat. The water was really low, which puts the trailer out at the end of the ramp where it's kind of shallow, so I had to really back out there a long ways before I could float the boat off, but that was just the nature of river elevation. It did fine. It floats about almost 2 inches higher than it did before. I didn't put a tape on it. It's hard for me to measure that, but I can tell it takes no water in the back scuppers unless we're both standing back there, and then it's only a little bit, and by the time I put some weight up front, that's probably going to go away. The boat does like to hit about 4,000 RPMs before it gets up on a plane. I don't really know if that's normal, but it will get up on a plane. And last time we ran the boat, had a lot of trouble with cavitation. So when I brought the boat back to the shop, I lowered the engine about 1.5 inches. And that was before I decided to renovate everything. So the pod is back where it was. The engine's about 1.5 inches lower than it was, but the pod is now shorter, so the engine needs to go down a little bit more. Cavitated once on a hard acceleration, and it wanted to cavitate a little bit on some of the hard turns, but I have adjustment ability now, so I can just unbolt it, drop it down, and rebolt it, so I will do that. I was kind of planning on that. And then we took a bunch of shots, just random shots with the speed and the fuel burn and RPMs. And I know this wasn't scientific. I didn't really have the trim dialed in perfectly. We didn't have any weight in the front of the boat, so it's kind of back heavy still. But just for general information, I thought this was pretty interesting. So it looks like I'm going to burn on average a little more than 3 miles. Well, I'm going to get 3 miles per gallon. Of course, it goes down the faster you go, and it goes down if you go too slow. So there's a sweet spot. But I'm kind of happy with that. I think that's good for an outboard. I don't really know. I wouldn't mind some comments on that. And then we just rode up and down the river, out in the lake, turned around, just trying to get comfortable with the boat. It's a little, it's so much faster than anything I've ever owned. It's a little unnerving going that fast. And it was a beautiful day. A lot of fishermen out. A few great white egrets. The prop stop, which is a local bar on the water, was empty. You won't see it like this in the summertime. It is packed in the summertime. But a beautiful day. I'm thankful for all I have. I'm thankful my boat went as good as it did. Thank Dave for coming with me. And thank you guys for watching. And we're not through yet. I don't have a trolling motor yet. I don't have any electronics yet. Rod holders. Geez, you name it. There's a bunch of stuff this boat still needs. So we'll keep throwing out the videos when I get something worth videoing, and just want to tell everybody thanks for watching. Oh yeah, and by the way, the E-Tech and the floatie are best friends forever, BFF. No problems at all with them. The floatie is completely out of the water at speed, and so everything's lovely.